Welcome, everybody, to Demystifying Mastering, our NWC webinar for today. We are joined by Noah Mintz, the owner and the senior mastering engineer at Lacquer Channel Mastering. I'm Andrew Leyenhorst, the assistant editor of Professional Sound. And of course, just want to welcome everybody today to our webinar. And Noah, how's it going?
It's going quite good. I've got Boy Golden behind me here, and we've been doing tape transfers and tape mastering from tape to tape for the past couple of days. Been really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So obviously today we're just going to kind of go into some of the basics of mastering, what it is, the whys, and it's this thing that always happens at the end, but people aren't exactly always sure what it even is. So we're going to talk with Noah about that today and kind of show some of the basic principles. And I guess what we'll start with, Noah, is what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about mastering?
Well, that's a great question, actually. I think the misconceptions are actually thinking mastering it can do more than it does. I think it's maybe easier to say what mastering, I think really mastering is, rather than the misconception, because there's so many misconceptions about mastering. Mastering, I'll tell you what mastering is not. It's not recording and it's not mixing. It's something specifically different than those things. Mastering is really just setting the tonal balance. Mastering at its core, at least creative pre-mastering, is equalization and setting the balance of the songs. And then you add on some compression and some amplitude manipulation to get songs either louder or less dynamic, or in some cases more dynamic, depending on what needs to be done. But it's just setting the tonal balance. It's not supposed to be very exciting. It's supposed to be kind of boring. You're not supposed to put your own tonal signature onto a record. Again, it changes because these days it's a lot different. These days, sometimes records come in and they need a tonal signature. They need a heavy hand. It's like, but for the most part, it's you're really just supposed to respect the mix. It's a third ear. One of the things we do is listen, and we're paid to listen. I go back to this quote a lot, but when I first got into mastering in 1996, I contacted George Massenburg and asked him if he had a deal on one of his equalizers, and he said no. And I'm like, well, do you have any advice? And he said, my only advice is he pays his mastering engineer a lot of money to tell him he's done a good job. And that resonated with me throughout my whole career, that I'm absolutely not afraid to do almost nothing, but sometimes it takes me twice as long to do nothing as it does to do something, because you have to have a extreme amount of confidence in the music to do nothing to it. And you got to try everything before you come to the conclusion that nothing is the best thing to do. And there's always a little something to do, whether it's editing, cleaning up, or a little volume balancing. But having that confidence to do nothing and putting zero sonic signature of yourself, whether it's using plugins or equipment that has no sound of its own, it takes a lot of confidence to do that.
Yeah. So I guess in that vein, what I'd be interested is, so as the mastering engineer, and keeping in mind the transparency there and kind of just respecting the mix, in a sense, would you say you're almost hoping to get something that you don't have to do barely anything to? Like, that's the ideal product in your opinion, or what to you is the ideal mix to receive?
Yeah, not for the most fun of it. Again, there's different levels of it. So like, if I really want to have fun with mastering, it's like, if I got to do a lot of work, that's a lot of fun. I've got a lot of gear. I have a lot of analog gear because I think it's really important. And, I probably only use one or two pieces at a time, but having that flexibility to use tubes or transformers or passive EQs or what have you, allows me to do what's right for that project. And the more I get to experiment, the more fun it is. But if you're delivered a mix that just sounds fantastic and there's not much to do to it, again, it takes a really long time to do that, to get there. But I wouldn't say those are my favorite projects. That's just, I feel like I'm really doing my job. But there's a negative side of that too, when an engineer delivers you something we think can need a lot of work and they don't want any work done to it.
Yeah.
So again, you got to drop your ego and got to go, okay, well, I'll just do what you're asking for, regardless of whether I think it's the right thing to do. And the only exceptions for that, I mean, a part of what mastering is being a technician and knowing what the rules are. And I absolutely think there are rules, and I mean, it's just a fact. And if things are out of phase, they either need to be corrected in the mix, or I mean, if bass is out of phase, you can't cut it to record. So I mean, it's simple, it just can't be cut. So there are rules. So sometimes we have to fix things. We have to use like isotope RX and fix stuff, or use a frequency-based phase changers. I don't know what they're called, but to fix things that are screwed up if something's too wide, or MS or something like that. So I guess my most favorite jobs, to answer the question, sorry, is something like today, where it comes in on tape and we get to just experiment and really just kind of like do something fun with it.
Cool. So I mean, actually, in that vein, like, what kind of stuff have you guys been trying out today?
Well, today is actually interesting. You don't mind me talking about this, yeah? Okay. Yeah, today is actually interesting because yesterday's project was recorded on 1/4-inch tape and mixed to 1/2-inch 15 IPs. But today's project was recorded on 8-track cassette and mixed to 1/2-inch 30 IPs. So we really want to kind of keep that sound that's happening. Like it's a mixture of like lo-fi and hi-fi, because the tape machine and an Ampex ATR running at 30 IPs is extremely hi-fi. And then of course the 8-track cassette is lo-fi. So we got this mix of sound, and so we're running it through a Neumann compressor at 1-to-1 ratio today. So we're not getting any compression, just the sound of the Neumann. We're running through my Neve mastering EQ. So we're really just getting a little bit of bass and top lift from it, and a little bit of transformer sound, and then a little passive EQ, and that's it. So we're just keeping, and then once that's all captured, then we're going to go into the digital side and experiment with it. I could actually show you like just an example here of what I would do on the digital side once it's captured, so you can sort of see what I would do there, if you want to see that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. And so just in the chat, everybody, if you have questions, we will take about 15 minutes at the end. So just leave your questions in the chat as they come up.
Okay, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So up here, this is the analog capture just from tape, like straight from tape to my AD converter.
Okay.
And then so I find my settings with that, and then below is the capture through the equipment. So I won't play it for you because it's not hooked up for that. But you can see like I'm getting a little bit of gain from the tape machine in through the equipment. That's because I'm using EQ, and if I do any additive on EQ, I'm actually adding gain. I'm adding like 2 dBs at 4K and 2 dBs at 100 hertz, and then doing some passive EQs. So it's, and the gain makeup on the passive EQs is doing that. And probably my Neumann is boosting it up too. So forget that this is analog capture or anything like that, but like, I'll just gonna show you what I would normally do, you know, because I'm probably gonna do that on this anyway. And this is how I'm working right now. Not how I'd worked maybe a year ago, or maybe how I work from a year from now. But this is how I'm working now, because I'm always constantly changing my digital flow. Once I've captured the analog, and I'd say about 70% capture analog, no matter what the project is. Okay. Sometimes I capture analog, I'm not happy with it, then I do an all digital master. But I always try analog first. It takes way longer. It's way more time for revisions. But for me, it's worth it. And I don't charge any more for it. If it sounds better, it sounds better. Yeah. If you can only do in the box, you can only ever do in the box. Simple as that. So, yep. So once I've captured it, I'm using Sequoia here, and I sort of trim it up, whatever. And then Sequoia is interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, what makes that your DAW of choice?
Well, you've got this cool little thing here. This is the object editor. And then, so let's say if I split this file in half, I can put an EQ on this half and another EQ on this half and a compressor.
Oh,
so I've got two different, these object editors. I've got two different, and I can split that up as much as I want and have all different settings, and I can even crossfade it if I want.
Okay, cool. So it kind of gets rid of the need for automation in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you can use it with automation too if you want it. Yeah. So
that's awesome. That's
sort of crossfade those two different settings there. So normally, I would take this song and I'd first go into my sort of mixer here and set my kind of overall volume.
Okay.
Let me take off. Okay. Okay, so some of the things I've been using as of late is some of the special effects, I guess, is like built into Sequoia is this multi-band stereo enhancer. I'm a big fan of presets to start. Yeah. So I do something like that.
So I could strokes.
So I would like spread the middle by 1.5, spread the high by 1.10, and maximize it by 10.
Okay.
And that's at the beginning of the chain. That's something I do right now, and I would just stereo spread it, hear how it sounds. Does it sound better? Does it sound worse? Mm-hmm. And if it sounds better, I'll leave it on. Now at the end, I might get rid of it altogether. But for now, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm going to start this with a little bit of stereo spread, especially if I'm not using MS and analog.
Yeah.
And then,
out of curiosity, when you're using spreaders like that, how much do you have to be taking phase into consideration?
Well, I'm only spreading the high mids and the top, so not a lot.
Okay. Cool.
And these days with stereo enhancement, because I've never really liked any stereo spreaders, and that stereo spreader is actually like 20 years old. And I keep rediscovering it every few years. And another one I try using is this one too, Leapwing Center 1.
Okay.
And I will what this does is just sort of EQs the side channel in a way. I'm actually straight up with you. I don't actually know what half this Leapwing stuff does. I just know how it sounds. I'm a very tactile person. I just kind of play with settings until it sounds the way it sounds, and long as it doesn't push anything out of phase. And this Leapwing does not push anything out of phase. But so basically, I take the center image, reduce it by 2, and you got the center bandpass EQ. And then the center prominence, I boost it by 2. And it just does this little thing to the side channel. Whatever it is, it brightens the side channel in a way that EQ doesn't. So I would just try between these two and see which one I like better.
Okay.
And again, I might take it all off at the end once I've done all my volumes and everything. I'll just start with it just to hear if it's going to enhance anything.
Yeah.
And then these days I've been using the Weiss Limiter quite a bit. Now, I've been using it in conjunction with Oxford Inflator. Again, I've owned this for 20 years and I just started using it.
Keep your plugins handy, folks. You'll need them eventually. I can't
stress enough that this is just how I'm doing it now. It's not how I did it like 4 months ago even, or even 3 months ago. Because I'm constantly changing how I make how I get volume. And they all sound good. Every different way sounds good. It's just I go through little trends in myself, and I think a lot of engineers do that. So this is how I'm doing it right now, and it's sounding really awesome on the stuff I'm working on. So the inflator is going after the limiter. So I set the inflator maybe just a taste, like maybe 10%.
Okay.
I set the parallel to 50%. I set my gain, 2, 3 dBs, whatever it is. The amount about 25%. And because I'm using the inflator after the limiter, I have to put on this peak limiter on. So I put it at 0.1 or 0.3. Okay. Otherwise, you distort, you overload the input of the inflator.
Yeah.
I keep it on punch. But this parallel mix has been a real, kind of lifesaver. It's kind of awesome. I've never used parallel in a limiter before until this.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like it on any other one but the Weiss. But it's funny because when I had the Weiss hardware, I'd only use it in parallel. So it's just a logical step for me here.
Yeah.
Now, so I set it to the volume. I get to about 80% of the volume I want. And then I throw this guy on. And I've been using this since the day it came out.
Okay.
The Leapwing Dyne 1. It's really incredible. So I set it threshold till I start seeing some movement, like downward movement.
Okay.
And then I start boosting the volume into the limiter, and then I set a bit of a curve. So it's kind of like the Limitless plugin in a way, because you're setting a curve for the limiter.
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting. So this is parallel.
Okay.
So I'm slightly compressing in parallel, and then blending that signal into the dry signal, feeding into the limiter to get volume. So the limiter's not doing all the work. The inflator is doing a very tiny bit of the work. And so I'm sort of splitting it between the Dyne 1 and the limiter. And basically, so I change up the limiters. I change up it's Oxford, the Dyne 1. I keep the Dyne 1, but this is basically how I've been getting volume for about 5 years now.
Okay. That's really interesting.
And I find it's just a way of gain staging. A lot of people use multiple limiters these days, and I've never liked how that sounds. So I find just a little bit of parallel limiting with this Dyne 1, which is it sounds like nothing. Like the guy Robin at Leapwing told me he spent a year just on the crossovers. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds really good. I can't stress enough how awesome the Dyne 1 is. It's really easy to overuse it, but it's great for getting volume. And I'm sure it's great for recording and mixing and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have to use it in parallel and use it in all different ways. But for feeding your limiter, it's really incredible. I've never heard anything so clean, and you can overdrive it, and there is no distortion.
That's cool.
It's just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with some of the double limiter thing, that's something I've done a few times that I've never been fully happy with it. I always find it's just got this weird rigidness to it.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about volume and all that, and anyway, because it's pretty hot topic as far as this goes. I remember your column.
Dave Dysart's calling me right now. YSL promoted this. He should know I'm doing this.
That's funny. But yeah, so I remember your column from a couple months back on loudness and LUFS and measurements as far as streaming services are looking for -14 and all of that. What's your take on the importance of loudness?
Yeah, I wrote a whole article on it. I'm actually launching a new blog in a couple of days, and I'm going to repost that article. I think LUFS. I hate LUFS. Now, it's a great tool for when I start to master. I actually level everything to -14, every song I get, as a starting point. It's just a great starting point to feed my analog equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I hate it. I think I listen to so many things. I spend so much time listening to stuff with normalization on and normalization off. And there's something going on. It's not just volume. There's no way, because as soon as I take loudness normalization off and adjust my volume, it sounds better.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that it's just volume adjustment. Also, -14 LUFS is way too quiet. Way too quiet.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
I can give you a million examples of things that sound fantastic. Just listen to Justin Bieber and Kid Leroy Stay. Listen to it. It's loud and it sounds awesome. The mix is incredible. It's amazing. Then throw that limiter on, or listen to the Atmos version, because the Atmos version is not was mixed and not mastered, but
yeah, the Atmos
to minus quiet. Yeah, it was mixed to -20 or whatever it was, and it misses all the punch of it. I don't understand why we need a loudness standard. I don't and then we don't have one yet, but loudness normalization makes no sense to me. Yes, we don't want loudness wars, but we can self-govern. Some things that are loud are meant to be loud. And I don't like it. I think some things sound good that are loud. Some things, I ask the client every single time how loud they want it. Mm-hmm. If they say, make it really loud, I make it really loud and I make it as clean as possible.
Yeah.
And if they say, give it dynamics, I give it dynamics. But more often than not, I get a mix in. I almost never get a mix in that's lower than minus 14 LUFS.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's 8 or 7. Like it's already loud by the time I get it. You can't unluff something, you know? You can't make something more dynamic. I mean, I there are ways, but it's just micro mounts. Like once dynamics are lost, they're lost forever. Mm-hmm. So if the mix is already there, like mastering engineers fought this loudness war for a while, and then mixing engineers just took it over, and they make things super loud.
Yeah,
it's already loud.
It even starts with the engineers and producers in this case too. Yeah, like even just the raw recording is just blown out. It's supposed to be.
Yeah,
if that's what.
And sometimes it sounds awesome, and that's the way it's supposed to sound. I've lost jobs before because the mix came in so loud, and I couldn't improve it. Like everything I did made it worse. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and it's that's the way they wanted to sound. That's the way they wanted it to sound. Yeah, who am I to say like it shouldn't be that loud? Yeah, unless it was a mistake, because oftentimes things come in super loud, and I'm like, did you mean to make it that loud? And they're like, oh no, I take your limiter off. There's a lot more I can do. Mm-hmm. So, I love to get in mixes that have dynamics.
Yeah. So on that note, actually, that leads into another thing that I wanted to discuss is actual kind of from a technical standpoint in terms of how things are delivered to you as the mastering engineer. What are you looking for in terms of, sample rates, file types, all of that stuff? What are you looking for?
Well, for sample rates go, I want it in whatever it was mixed in. So like sample and bit depth, whatever it's mixed in, bring me that. But I like put on stuff on your master bus if you feel it's enhancing what you're doing. But if you're putting like a Pultec on your master bus, like ask your mixing engineer if they have a Pultec, mm-hmm. that you don't necessarily have to put a Pultec, because I have a Pultec. Yeah. So like, I don't, you can even send me, hey, I put this on my Pultec. Here's what I used in my Pultec. Can you recreate that? But generally take limiters off or take dynamics off if you can, unless it's really important to the sound. Mm-hmm. But if it's a plugin, I can 100% replicate it if you give me the settings. So, and then I have flexibility to do stuff before it. Mm-hmm. Or I can do it in analog. Yeah. Like if you're using an API plugin, I can use an API compressor, a hardware one. So I think that dialogue needs to happen a lot more, where the mixing person converses with the mastering engineer and goes, here's what I've done. Here's how I like how it sounds. Here's what I've used. Okay. And I have no problem. Like I worked with someone a couple of years ago, and they're like, I sent them the master. They didn't like what I did. I'm like, well, what did you do? And they're like, oh, we used the BX digital master bus. Okay. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, nothing I have sounds like that. So send me your settings, and I'll do what you did, and I'll just try to improve on it. Okay. It worked.
That's for whatever reason, I hadn't thought about that whole idea of just talking about gear and stuff beforehand and being like, hey, I've got this and want to use this as part of the mix.
Because you have a pretty good vision of what you want it to sound like, and your artist has been listening to the reference mix for so long, and more often than not, they want it to sound like that, for better or for worse. So
I guess
I have to improve on the reference mix every time.
And I guess that's interesting too, because in the sense of sort of getting re-demoitis from like listening to a reference or something that has a limiter on it, just for the sake of like.
Yeah. Well, the worst is if the reference mix is louder than the master I would have done.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm just like, and maybe it's too loud, and it's like, I'm like, it's going to sound better if it has a bit of dynamics. And then, but the artist then hears the reference mix and it sounds louder, and they're like, And they're like, well, we like that better. So hearing that reference mix is always good.
Cool. I guess I'm curious to hear more a little bit about your kind of just, philosophies of digital versus analog. And I guess, you prefer analog, but I guess, in a lot of cases too, for people, I suppose, who are looking to kind of more just start learning themselves, who might not have access to the gear.
Okay. So I'm an analog person for sure. My dog, here, I'll show you.
Yes.
She was sleeping. There's my dog. Her name is Analog. Yeah, she doesn't care.
Love her.
I don't actually prefer analog. I really enjoy it. So
it's more fun, yeah.
I have this thing I say, and it's like you take 1,000 engineers with a Pultec plugin, the same settings, it's going to always sound exactly the same. You take 1,000 engineers with one Pultec in 1,000 different studios, it's always going to, with the same setting, it's always going to sound different.
Mm-hmm.
Analog has a je ne sais quoi. It's not always the best thing. First of all, it's more fun, a lot more work, but way more fun to turn knobs. Simple as it's tactile. It's nature to touch things.
Yeah, I get into that discussion a lot about with guitarists about amps and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same. I mean, it's music. People say that the song is the most important thing. Of course it is, but the music is the sum of its parts. Like from everything down to the amplifier to the equalizer used. Mm-hmm. Everything. Like when people say that, none of that, only the song matters. I mean, the Beatles, there were hundreds of people employed in the equipment design and just to make Beatles albums. Like the equipment is important, but it's all the sum of its parts. So whether you're using a Kemper or a tube amplifier, it's how it connects with you in the end. And maybe tubes just have a little more natural connection to the listener. I don't know. I can't actually say, but to me, I like the sound of it better.
Yeah.
As opposed to a plugin of tubes.
Mm-hmm.
There's non-linearities. Plus, a plugin of tubes is going to sound the same every single time. Every single time I turn on my Pultec, it sounds different. Mm-hmm. The tubes are hours older every day. So It's it just sounds different. It's but the way I work to turn knobs, to feel, to reach out and touch things, mm-hmm. it translates to my ears differently than when I'm running a mouse.
Yeah, you're more plugged into it, kind of mentally.
Yeah, I hear 2 dBs at 100 hertz differently on my EQ than I do 2 dBs at 100 hertz on a digital a plug-in EQ. Mm-hmm. It's just whether it's psychological or not, all my EQ decisions are psychological. Yes. Everything I'm doing is psychological. So it's what is the right thing? It's just I'm turning the knobs till it sounds good. You're using a different part of your brain when you're using plugins. So, but like I said, I'll start analog. Mm-hmm. And if it's not sounding right, I'll just do it in the box.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to just say the analog doesn't sound great for that, or I don't have the right tools. Mm-hmm. It's let me tell you, we all know that if you're doing it in the box and you get a revision, it's no big deal at all.
Yeah.
It takes minutes to recall. If you're doing analog, it's a lot of work to do it. But for me, it's
the whole chain, right?
What's that? Sorry?
You got to do the whole chain, right?
Yeah. You got to recall everything. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot more work, but it's but if it's right what's for the project, it's right what's for the project. It's and who doesn't love gear? I love the gear. I love hiring all these people to tweak things out. And I love the way the knobs look and the way the knobs shine. And I love just looking down and seeing this stuff, it's it's pleasurable to my eyes. Mm-hmm. And it makes me really love what I do. Yes. I don't think I could do that if I was in the box. I think I think if I was only in the box, if I only tools were my mouse, I think I'd lose the lust for it.
I suppose, yeah, there's some of the warmth, pun intended, of like, this is my stuff kind of thing.
Yeah.
These are my toys.
It's great to own it. And like, look, like to be real here, it's a fucking expensive. And like to maintain, like my Soundtech EQ, I've put $8,000 in repairs over the past 20 years. Like most people don't pay $8,000 in an EQ itself.
Yeah.
It's really expensive. I'd have a lot more money in the bank if I didn't buy all this shit. But for me, it's worth it. And it's like, it's what I do. To stay true to this, to my career, and stay true to being a full-time mastering engineer that only knows how to master. I have no idea how to mix. I have no idea how to record. I only know how to master. And same with Phil here. We're both just mastering engineers. Lacquer channel has always been, since 1974, has been pretty hardcore about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so that kind of gets me into another one of my thoughts, is just basically the whole idea of kind of preparing things for different mediums.
Yeah, sure.
So how you're going to approach, say, if you're doing a master for vinyl versus something that's, for, just a more general release on the radio, or for specifically for streaming.
Right. Well, we're a vinyl house, so I have the incredible advantage of being able to take a master, like literally the room over there, and say, hey, can you do a test cut of this so I can hear what it sounds like? I mean, I don't get to do that very often because he's so busy, but we've been able to experiment and hear what sounds best on a lacquer, on vinyl. And dynamics always win out, always. A more dynamic album just sounds better on vinyl, but then sometimes, like punk rock, a little bit of limiting sounds a little bit better on a lacquer. So, actually, minus 14 LUFS is a great target for vinyl. Actually, funny enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, as far as if specifically somebody wants to cut something to a record, like, are you gonna want quieter mixes, kind of thing?
Well, if you're delivered mixes that are super, that's why I try to tell producers and engineers all the time. If your mix is already loud, it's never going to sound as good as it could on vinyl. And I'll fucking die by that statement. It will never sound as good as it could. You'll never know how good it could have sounded on vinyl.
Right.
If it's lacking dynamics.
Yeah, that makes
damage
sense.
is done. So generally, if I'm doing an analog master, the first pass is more or less the vinyl master.
Okay.
And then the digital master is built from the vinyl master in that way I just showed you with the stuff. I usually take that stuff off. Sometimes I'll keep the Dyne one on, but I'll take that stuff off for the digital for the vinyl master. So, and then if I'm working all in the box, then it's just basically just EQ and a bit of compression, and then the volume stuff done after is taken off for the vinyl master. So the vinyl master always has dynamics.
Yeah.
And then you deliver one master for streaming, and that's it. You can't deliver multiple versions. Sometimes I'll deliver a specific master for YouTube because YouTube does allow you to upload just to YouTube, and YouTube does have built-in loudness normalization. So, and you can't change that. So. But that's rare. I'll do that. So it's basically, there's a vinyl master and there's a streaming master, and I deliver at 16-bit, 24-bit, and MP3. And the 24-bit is always delivered at the sample rate the mix is at.
Okay, cool. So then I guess as far as that goes, oh boy, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, well.
That's okay.
It happens.
I can talk about something. I can talk about
Sure.
how, before we get to questions here, I can talk about my sort of workflow, how I like getting delivered files. Because I think if you're
absolutely
interested in mastering, it's a really kind of good thing to know, because I spent 20 years developing my workflow. So
yeah, the system and that's all very important.
So
real quick, I actually did think of one of my,
sure.
I thought of my other question, which is that, have you ever had it happen where like an artist decides to use the vinyl master for streaming and other stuff just because they like it more?
Yeah. But that's if they don't want a loud master in general. Like they just didn't want that. So yeah, but I've never anyone say, oh, I like the vinyl master more and I'll just use that.
Okay.
But because there are some like little things between Kevin and I that I do. And that's if it's being cut here.
Right.
So like there's some de-essing things and some EQ things that are done specifically for our lathe. But that's not really for public consumption, right? Because it's meant for our lathe. So
cool.
Yeah, let me just show you real quick what I do here. So basically, these days I work on Dropbox. I also have Backblaze, but I work in Dropbox. So my files are backed up in real time. And if anything goes wrong, I have to work in Windows because Sequoia is Windows, but it doesn't matter what computer you have. I cannot stress this enough. We're all working on solid state drives these days. When solid state drives die, they die forever.
Right.
You cannot restore a solid state drive. So having a real-time backup is really important. So I work in Dropbox. I basically have these folders here. So I get the files in. They go into this folder. Why is this not? Oh, sorry. Changes in trackball.
Oh, great.
Let's see. So I'll get the files in. You can see it's 8 gigabytes. This came in. It's like the green check marks there means it's been backed up by Dropbox. The hell? So what is going on? The files just go in there. They get loaded in. What is wrong? I'm sorry, my mouse is starting to freak out right now.
All good. But that's cool. So you're just the files themselves, like you're just straight up, you're working out of the cloud.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, no, it's local. It's backed up to the cloud. Yeah.
You know, it's the same way that I actually work on my stuff for the magazines, basically.
Yeah.
All just kind of in that local thing, but then you save it immediately, it throws it back. But that's a really cool way of, I didn't think of actually.
So I work exclusively at 96K. Let me just hit this button a bunch of times. Yeah. Now I work exclusively at 96K. So anything that comes in, I just upsample to 96K. It's just how I work.
Yep.
People can argue about upsampling. I don't care. To me, upsampling sounds the same as not upsampling. So I upsample 96K. It runs out here, gets captured here. Then I do all my plugins and then I output. So when I output, it outputs immediately into, I have this 32-bit bit masters non-Dropbox. So it outputs to there. So it's not being uploaded to Dropbox.
Okay.
So that's just my output. Because after that output at 32-bit, I go into RX. You can see this, right?
Yep.
And then I've got a 24-bit, 16-bit MP3. And I load in all the files. And then they get outputted to 24-bit, 16-bit, and MP3.
Okay.
All simultaneously into a holding folder. And that holding folder is on Dropbox. So it immediately starts uploading. They get loaded into there. And then I go into this Noah Masters folder. And then you can see.
Okay. Cool.
Right now it's just the 24-bit ref files, but you can see there. And then, so they're all loaded there. These are just 24-bit reference files for him to listen to. And then I just simply right-click on it, Dropbox, copy Dropbox link. And I go into my email. into Golden Boy, Masters. Highlight that.
Cool.
Now when he clicks on that folder, it's the Dropbox folder. And anytime I make a change, the folder, the link always.
Cool.
Yeah, it's simple as that. It's just like, that's my workflow. Just basically get the files, load them in, process them out, export them, and everything except for the export stays in Dropbox.
Cool.
And then I do, and at the end I deliver 24-bit, 16-bit, and MP3.
Awesome. Cool. I think that covers most. So let's take some questions.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Cool. Let me go through and have a look here. So this first one here from John, it kind of, in essence, I suppose it kind of, we covered it a little bit, but so yeah, the idea of just wondering if mastering takes care of playing songs across all platforms.
Okay,
in terms of, chance to talk.
Not even all platforms. It's the goal of mastering, really, these days anyway, is to make it play as good as possible on as many devices as possible.
Yeah.
So every speaker, every format, every service, it should sound consistent and good on everything. So sometimes I tell people if they like the reference master better, I go, because it might be louder, I go, okay, well, play it on 5 different things. And then play the one I did on 5 different things. What works better for you? And more often than not, the one I did. Because the one I did might not sound the most hype, but it's going to sound better across multiple playback systems.
Cool.
Because I only use one pair of speakers, and I've been using them forever. And they're very large, giant speakers, very heavy, but they're very like real world. They sound like a composite of everything. Like if it sounds good in here, they're Kranis. They're actually made by a Toronto designer. I don't think he's around anymore as far as building speakers, but he built them for the studio.
Oh, nice. So they're built for that room.
Yeah, Kevlar drivers and Focal tweeters. And I use this Trinov room EQ thing. That was like thousands of dollars, and it EQs the room, and then Bryson amplifiers. And the room also sounds really great. But then I've, in the early days, I just listened to as many different systems as possible. And I know how to make things translate. So, so it should sound as good. It shouldn't just sound good on one thing. It should sound good on pretty much everything. That's cool. And if it doesn't, then I got to do something different, because a lot of times I get a revision that people say sounds great on everything. It's kind of distorting in my headphones. And I'm like, and they're like, I know that's kind of a problem because it does sound good on everything. I'm like, no, I mean, I have to fix that. It to a degree anyway, but it has to work on everything. Can't distort on, unless it's like a $10 pair of speakers. It has to not distort on everything. So it has to sound consistent.
Sweet. From CGR, considering how expensive analog is, what's the best Pultec emulation you'd recommend? UAD.
I've tried them all. The UAD one is as close to a real Pultec as you're ever going to get. It's even copies the noise floor of the Pultec. I think it's awesome, and I use it all the time, even though I have an actual Pultec.
Cool. All right. Hey, Noah, Joseph from Light Organ /604 Records here. Loved your note about if you mix too loud, you'll never know how good it sounds on vinyl. What would be 1 or 2 other crucial nuggets you would pass along to new bands and younger engineers who want to have their music on vinyl?
Yeah, great question. I love Light Organ, such a cool label. But dynamics, making sure your bass is not stereo. Bass should be mono. That's just number 1 rule for vinyl. Stereo bass just doesn't work. It's not good. Even like if it's hard panned, sure, that's still mono. It's fine, no problem. But stereo bass is the biggest problem. Dynamics, and finding a place for everything in the stereo field, like that really, that's a great rule for anything. But if if an album is really, really mono, you're not really using the space on vinyl. So having a really good stereo image really helps to make a great sounding vinyl record.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, but stereo bass is the most important thing. Then dynamics, like don't try. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened. Don't try to mix it too loud.
Right.
Like if you want a great sounding vinyl, because vinyl is not just product. Vinyl is, there are people who actually listen to the records, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people buy vinyl, don't have a record player, but the people who do like really care about how it sounds, and that's why they bought a record player.
Cool. In terms of the like no stereo bass thing, like what would you say in terms of like which frequency for sure to like not have anything stereo above or below?
I don't know, like maybe 120 hertz, but then you're fixing it in mixing, and I think that should be in the recording side. Like it shouldn't, the stereo bass thing shouldn't have to be fixed. Like it should already be recorded that way. So just keep like, and anytime bass is stereo, it's usually a creative decision that just doesn't need to be made. The only exceptions are like keyboards, because sometimes keyboards, the sounds are already stereo bass frequencies when they dip down there, and that can be corrected just for the vinyl master anyway. So that's
okay, cool. Because I know like there's a lot of options in terms of the kind of like mono makers, in the sense of, you know, you set your crossover and then it just automatically takes your whole thing and can do that. So just
well, look, I've had masters in that I'm like, your bass is out of phase. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like you got different bass on the left and the right. They're like, yeah, we did a P bass on the right and a jazz bass on the left. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool, but they're canceling each other out a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, you have to listen to that. Or a Rhodes piano is another one that will interfere with bass a lot if you're recording Rhodes in stereo. So there's just things to look out for. I mean, the actual simple answer is monitor in mono in recording and mixing. People forget to do that so often. You have to put it in mono. Like you have to listen to the mono. If your stereo image collapses in mono, then you gotta fix it. Mm-hmm. Like unless you're okay with a different mix in mono than it is in stereo, like make sure it sounds as good in mono as it does in stereo.
Yes, honestly, it was one of those. I had a little bit of a lesson in that with something of mine that you mastered.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. So moving on, another one from CGR, and we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but I think we're maybe looking at more of a specific figure. At what levels do you typically ask people to send mixes at?
Right.
If anything.
That is really hard to answer that. Like I actually do think minus 14 LUFS is probably a pretty good target for mixes.
For the mix, not for masters.
Yeah, for mixes. Yeah, it's a pretty good target. I don't actually ask for a level like it should, because every album has got its. Oh, this is a really good statement. As I think it to myself, every album has its own sweet spot. Mm-hmm. So some are going to be louder, some are going to be quieter. You know, and it's like, and the mixing guy always kind of knows. You know, he's like playing with those faders. But I think the level of the album should be set in the faders, not in the master bus.
Right.
That's probably, like I said, I know very little about mixing, so a lot of mixing people might go, well, duh. Like I don't know. Like I just don't know this stuff. But I know enough to say that the best sounding records are the ones that the level is set in the faders, not in the master bus.
Cool.
If you take your master bus off and your level goes down minus 10 dBs, you probably should have your fader should have probably been coming up a little bit.
Nice. Cool. Another one from Bernie. What about mastering old, poorly recorded music from cassettes? Is there hope?
Yeah, hell yeah. So Telephone Explosion and We Are Busybodies are two really awesome record labels, and I've done a ton of mastering from cassette for that. And we made it sound great. I've got a Nikamichi cassette machine. It sounds as good as a CD with a good cassette. With a cassette, an RX, you can Isotope RX, you can really do wonders. Like, it's really great. And don't forget, we're mastering from 8-track cassette right now. So not 8-track, like you know, eight channel cassette.
Yeah, cool.
And it's sounding awesome. So cassette's still kind of cool. I mean, I think if you're going to release cassettes, I think that's kind of dumb because there's not a lot of machines out there, and they're all dying by the day. But
you got to find an old car.
Yeah, but if you find an old cassette of your own and you play it, you'll be surprised how good it sounds. It's crazy.
Cool. I really like this next one. This one's from Shay. So I have a single out that when I heard it on the radio, I almost didn't recognize because the bass was so overwhelming. Was that a mastering issue or a radio DJ preference or mistake?
Okay, it depends what radio station. If it's commercial radio, it's definitely a mastering issue. If it's like college radio or some other kind of radio, it could just be a bad, like the technician just set the multiband FM compressor wrong. But just like I said, that my master should sound good on everything. If it sounds like shit on the radio, I've done a bad job. Sounds like shit, sounds great on everything except for the radio, I've done a bad job.
Okay.
So yeah, it's mastering.
Cool. This one's from Claire. What should artists be looking for when they're listening to their masters, and how can they achieve the best results?
That's an awesome question. A volume is the first thing you listen to. How does the overall volume sit to the other albums you like? Because these days, that's the biggest thing we're doing is volume. We're like how we get the volume is the most important thing. So whether it's analog, digital, which plugin we're using to get volume, which combination of plugins to get volume, that's going to shape how it sounds.
Cool.
And EQ is just volume. So, so volume is the first thing, and then trying it out in a bunch of different systems and making sure it sounds good on everything. Also, how does it feel? How does it connect to you? How does it make you feel when you listen to it? Does it feel like your record? You know,
Yeah.
If it doesn't, try to articulate why it doesn't. Revisions. I say, like, you know, I've been doing this 23 years now. I don't have that many revisions anymore, but I still consider the revision process the most important part. And that revision process is when the client goes home and listens to it.
Yeah.
That is the revision process. Because for me, the most important part of mastering is listening. So the most important part, your job, is actually listening when you go home. And just saying approval, that is the revision process of you saying, yeah, I approve this, because it's not done until the client approves it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, there's a few more here. Okay, this is an interesting one from Ronson. A little bit more about the mixing stuff, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. As a mix engineer, I'm constantly struggling with mixing into a mastering chain. Sometimes I put a limiter on to see what a rough master would be like. Often this isn't what the actual mastering will do. I've had experiences where I send a mix off to mastering and it comes back tonally and changed tonally and balance-wise when it gets squashed. Any advice or thoughts on mixing into a mastering chain, or how to try and anticipate mastering's processing when mixing?
Absolutely. So I feel like these days you kind of have to mix into some sort of mastering chain or into a limiter, but it's just like listening to mono. You got to keep switching it off and on and comparing. So does your mix sound obviously a lot quieter, but does it sound as good when the mastering chain is off as when it's on? And then deliver that faux mastered mix to the mastering engineer and tell them that's how you've been listening to it. Mm-hmm. That's really helpful to me. I feel like I've am experienced enough to not let it sway my decisions unless the mixing engineer is going, this is the way we want it to sound. It gives me a reference point to know what they've been listening to. Mm-hmm. But I still do what I'm going to do. And that's just, again, like the confidence I have. I've been doing it for so long that I'm confident enough to deliver something what I feel is right. And also I have enough of I don't know what the word is, but if the client comes back and says they hate it, I'm not offended in the least. Yeah. I'll just try it. I'll do it differently. It's always, sometimes if I'm unsure, I'll send an email that says, keep in mind, this is my interpretation of how I think it should sound.
Yeah.
You could not agree, and I can do something different. There's a million different ways to do this. There's no one right way to do it.
Yeah,
So,
and I guess in that regard, it kind of is this. It's the same thing when you're hiring a producer or an engineer or a mixer, where like you're kind of hiring a mastering engineer for their taste.
Yeah,
in a sense.
Yeah, but they really shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And I'm adamant about this. They really shouldn't be doing their sonic signature.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a creative part of the recording process.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be boring, and it's like that's why I love analog gear, because it makes it more fun. But I'm not running through my Neve EQ and the transformer in it because I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I'm only running through it because it sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it because it's like cool to run through and it looks fucking cool, because it does look fucking cool. Like, look at this thing. Look at that EQ. It's, well, hold on, there we go. It's awesome. But like, I don't want that to like influence me and say I want to use it because it's there. You know, it's like it has to sound better, or whatever that means, better. It has to enhance the project.
Yeah, cool.
Right. So I forget what the question was, but that was my answer.
Cool. Another one from a different John. Do you have a reference music that you listen to guide a master?
Yeah. Okay. So that's where the confidence comes that if I'm at all unsure, then I have no problem going to something that I think sounds like it to listen to. And then I'll usually like, you know, if I listen to something and I'm like, okay, this kind of sounds like Billie Eilish, I'll listen to Billie Eilish and see what it sounds like in comparison to it. And what I can do is I'm gonna try to get sounding as good, at least as good as that. I mean, maybe not at least, because Billie Eilish sounds incredible, but, or if the client gives me a reference, I've got, you know, Tidal, iTunes, Apple Music, I got them all, except for Spotify. and I will call anything up, and I'll often ask the artist, hey, what are we listening to in the mix, or what do you want it to sound like? And you won't believe how many times the artist will say, I'm not trying to compare it to anything, just do what you do. And that's great. And it's like, and I'll just do what I do. And but again, it comes with that confidence to like, or that self confidence to say, hey, if you don't like it, it's okay. I will reinvent the wheel and do something different. Absolutely. There's no ego.
Cool. All right. Two more. So this one's from Liz. How are Isrc codes embedded in a master, and how are they read? How important is it to have them embedded in a master?
That's a super awesome question. I've never been asked before, but I've said a million times. So Isrc codes these days are really just used for streaming. So they're just sent at the streaming level. You can embed an Isrc into a file, a WAV file only, but it basically can't be read. It can be read in a terminal, like a command line, but that's it. So absolutely unnecessary to have an Isrc in a file, and as soon as it's made into an MP3, it disappears anyway. Isrcs are given away in Canada for free, connect.ca or connectmusic.ca, because as soon as you Google it, the first thing comes up is to sell you an Isrc, but they are free. Totally unnecessary to be embedded into a file because nothing reads it, but you do need it for streaming, and they will either give it to you or you can just get them yourself for free.
Cool. And then the last one is from our friend Dave Dysart. Noah, when are we going for a dog walk?
Well, she can't walk yet, Dave. But she like steps on my feet when she tries to walk, and she here, I'm gonna pick her up again. There we go.
The grand finale.
Here
Let's have a look at the dog again.
Hello.
Awesome.
She just bites my legs when we try to walk. So we're not there yet, but soon, maybe in about a month, I think. She gets her next shots on May 2nd.
Nice.
Little analog. Cool. She's a total studio dog now. She just hangs out and lies underneath my bar cart and just listens to music.
That's awesome. Best ears in the biz, that dog.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Feel free to send me questions via email. It's like, I love talking about mastering. literally the only thing I know anything about. So
Yeah. Do
I
you
love
want
talking.
to, are you cool with leaving your email in the chat?
Yeah, just lacquerchannel@gmail.com. I don't, how do you chat?
Here, let me
Oh, here
just,
we go.
cool.
Here we go. I got it.
So yeah, that'll be that for everybody. A recording will be made available and will be sent out within the next couple days. And as well, there's going to be a resources email going out afterwards. That's going to have a few things for you to look at, including the new issues of Canadian Musician, Professional Sound, a few things on Music Books Plus as far as mastering goes as well. And it'll take you to the Lacquer Channel website too. So
Yeah, and also
no,
one last thing, I'll say that whether you're a client or not, once things start getting back to normal, which is pretty much now, I think, but you're welcome to come by the studio and come listen to stuff. Like I spend hours and hours just listening to music here, and I'd love you to join me. So come listen to some music. You don't have to be a client. You don't have to ever be a client. You don't have to just come listen to some music.
Sweet, sounds good. Thanks so much, Noah. This is awesome.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Andrew. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks everybody for coming, and yeah, make sure to just stay tuned. You'll get an email coming with resources as well as a recording in the next couple days. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Noah, thank you so much.